Welcome back, delegates. We're looking forward to another great afternoon. Before we begin, I have a couple of announcements to make. Firstly, the Aberdeen Host Committee would like you to go and collect your raffle prizes from stand 4. If you've entered the raffle, perhaps you've won, so they'd love to see you later. And YSI have asked that I let you know that tickets are available now for their karaoke this evening, so I'm sure we'll see you all there. So moving on to business then, conference. Later at approximately 3 p.m. we will deal with topical and emergency resolutions, and I'll read over these now. So the first resolution is on the subject of Catalonia. And the resolution reads, Conference deplores the announcement today by the Spanish courts of their condemnation of politicians from the former Catalan government and public figures, including Oriol Junqueras and Carme Forcadell, to many decades of imprisonment on charges of rebellion and misuse of public funds. Conference believes that the situation must be and can only be resolved politically, peacefully and through dialogue. Conference resolves to stand in the spirit of solidarity with the independence movement in Catalonia and reiterates our commitment to democracy for people across the world and the exercising of the right to self-determination. And that resolution is in the name of YSI. The next topical and emergency resolution is Improving Gypsy and Traveller Lives, and this resolution reads, Conference welcomes the launching of the Improving the Lives of Gypsy Travellers 2019 to 2021 Action Plan, which sets out 33 actions to take forward across local and national government to make meaningful progress towards addressing the discrimination and disadvantage experienced by Gypsy traveller communities. Conference understands the plan will see an investment of £3 million to improve living standards on public sector sites, improve the delivery of flexible family learning, and to test innovative ways of offering health and social care services. Conference accepts there is a long tradition of Gypsy travellers in Scotland, and it is important the community feels safe and respected and believes they are valued members of Scotland's diverse cultural heritage. And that is in the name of Christina McKelvey, MSP. And the final topical resolution is entitled Kashmir Emergency, and the resolution reads, Conference believes that free and fair elections, free from military and state interference, should be available to all who live in a democracy. However, Conference notes with concern the decision by the Indian government to unilaterally abolish Kashmir's semi-autonomous status and place it under direct military control. Conference stands in solidarity with the citizens of Kashmir who have been placed in a communication blockade and are under curfew, now into its 3rd month, and notes with concern that many of their elected representatives and political leaders are currently in detention. Conference calls on the international community to condemn the treatment of citizens living in Kashmir, notes that the people of Kashmir have the right to self-determine their future as outlined in the UN Security Council resolutions, and encourages all to find a peaceful and diplomatic route to restore human and democratic rights to Kashmir. So, Conference, before we get to the resolutions, I'm really delighted to introduce to you this year's fraternal address from Plaid Cymru, the Party of Wales. Delegates, please welcome to the stage the Assembly Member for the Welsh Assembly for South Wales East, the Shadow Minister for International Affairs and the Future, and perhaps she'll tell us what the future holds, Delith Jewell, AM. Welcome, Delith.
Fesgirma agus Cymera Hashaf. Well, friends, you certainly know how to make a person feel welcome. Scotland, I bring you greetings from Wales, where, as I'm sure you've seen, something big is happening. There has been There has been a surge in support for independence these past few months. It started as a rumbling, so quiet we barely noticed the change until it grew to a crescendo of realization that the time for independence has to be now. In Cardiff, in Carnarvon, in Merthyr Tydfil, thousands of people are marching all under one banner to show their optimism, their dynamism, their hope. You in Scotland have lit the torch for us. You've shown us the way, and we extend our thanks to you. We especially thank you in the SNP. Under Nicola Sturgeon's leadership, you show us that the thing we are striving for is possible. We look to you for inspiration. Now, in 2014, I was proud to walk the streets of Glasgow with the Yes campaign, and when you get your second referendum, I'll be here again. So tell me, conference. So tell me, conference, when we in Wales follow in your footsteps, will you join me to campaign for Wales's independence? I'm going to hold you to that. So, of course, the change we are living through is a product of the time we are living in. Brexit has exposed the sorry state of British rule, and people are longing for an alternative. We thought we had it bad with Theresa May. But at least she had the good grace to admit defeat. Boris Johnson instead lurches from one should-be fatal blow to the next, urging anyone who'll listen that it's just a flesh wound, as the ground grows redder at his feet and his once blood-red lines soak into the carpet and stain everything they touch. What a sorry show it all is. The toing and froing, the shamefully sham negotiations, veiled threats, desperate dealing, backstop blundering. You wouldn't like him when he's angry. Yellowhammer, lying to the Queen, prorogation, non-papers, surrender bill. Do not waste this time, is what Donald Tusk warned us. But Boris Johnson didn't simply look to run down the clock. He tried to persuade the clock to stop ticking, that ticking was unpatriotic, that ticking wasn't listening to the will of the people. He tried to punch the clock, but he hadn't counted on the Supreme Court taking a view and was surprised when shards of glass hailed down upon him. Johnson went in with all guns blazing, and every one of them backfired. So he was left, face charred, hair singed, with only a dour Dom Cummings left to pick up the bullet cases. He is a man without shame, and he will deserve all the contempt and ridicule that history will wreak upon him. And so we meet in this time when, as Robert Burns oddly prophesied, Europe's eye is fixed on mighty things, the fall of empires and the fate of kings. Well, I wouldn't exactly call Boris Johnson a king, but he has lost his queen, and his empire sits in tatters at his feet. We are witnessing a significant moment. The twilight hours of a bitter kingdom are fading away. The Westminster system is breaking, and just as the court jester politics and the grubby corridor dealing is exposed, so the cloisters and towers enfolding it crumble to dust, the ruined palace on the banks of the water. Few in this hall will salute her passing. But the debris of Westminster does not just signal a decline, it also points towards restoration. We would say in Welsh, Cawn adfeirio or adfeilion, we will restore from the rubble. For as your beloved Hugh MacDiarmid made clear, there are plenty of ruined buildings in the world, but no ruined stones. As Westminster falls away, it gives you in Scotland and us in Wales the chance to build a new set of nations from these ruins. It's fitting as we meet in the Granite City, because you in Aberdeen know more than most the value of masonry, of stonework. It has its practical value, but stones also hold a distinctly emotional resonance for those of us interested in nation building. Let me tell you a story. It is a true one. There is a mural in mid-Wales, painted on a low stone wall that has gained iconic status over many decades. The wall is coated in red paint, and daubed over that in crude white letters are the words Cofiwch Tryweryn, meaning remember Tryweryn. Tryweryn was the name of a valley that was flooded in 1965 deliberately to make way for a reservoir for Liverpool. Every single Welsh MP had voted against the plans, but they did it anyway. They drowned out our protestations and drowned our village. Now that event was a turning point in the Welsh psyche, and the mural itself became almost talismanic, urging the Welsh people to never forget this attack on our soil and our soul. Time and again, people have painted over that mural only for the words to reappear soon afterwards. A palimpsest, an embodiment in stone of the nation's psychological oscillation between submission and defiance. In April of this year, the wall was painted over again and the words reappeared soon afterwards. Only then someone smashed through a part of the wall. Most barbarically, they smashed through the word Cofiwch, meaning remember. I say barbarically because surely a nation is made up of her memories, good and bad. They can never be reduced to rubble. What the Vandals didn't count on was that the attack on these stones ignited something in the Welsh people that had lain dormant these many years. I don't think it is a coincidence that a surge in support for independence has been seen in recent months. Symbols are powerful, and when they're attacked, it can make people reassess what they hold dear. As Yeats had said, the stone's in the midst of all. Now, that section of the wall was rebuilt quickly, it was reinforced, and copycat murals emblazoned with Cofiwch Tryweryn have appeared the length and breadth of Wales ever since. In stone, we have set out our stock. We have to reinforce it with action because a nation, of course, is not built from stone alone. It is built with grit, determination, hope. Those are the true building blocks of a nation, the things which move us to build mountains. A few months ago, our leader, Adam Price, announced that in 2021, when Plaid Cymru wins the next Welsh election, I will be made the world's first Minister for the Future. Kurt Vonnegut had said that the position missing from every government in the world, and the one most needed, was a minister charged with ensuring that every decision made takes into account the impact on future generations, the very people who can't be here to speak for themselves. Now, I've taken that challenge. I've taken that challenge on in earnest, friends, and in our conference earlier this month, I announced that the next Plaid Cymru government will set well-being and future budgets so that the well-being of our environment, as well as citizens today and tomorrow, will inform the heart of our spending decisions. Wales will join you in Scotland, as well as Iceland and New Zealand, in being a well-being economy government. You may have noticed that the acronym for these countries is WINS, and conference. When governments are economically just and environmentally responsible, everyone wins. This brings us to the very heart of why it is that we want independence. Friends, we don't want independence because the word sounds nice. We don't want independence because the principle is important. No, we want independence so that we can make our own decisions and make decisions that will improve the lives of the people who live in our communities. I see two futures stretching ahead of us, one beleaguered and inward-looking, wearing a post-imperial shame and searching all the while for a soul that was never ours. The other, with our sights towards the sky, ready to take our place among the free peoples of the earth. Stop the world. We want to get on. Friends, you may have noticed from those words that Winnie Ewing is an inspiration to me. I'd like to tell you another story. The year was 1966, and Gwynfor Evans had just become the first Plaid Cymru MP. Winnie had not yet been elected, and she was invited to the Plaid Cymru conference in Dolgellau. She presented Gwynfor with a basket of heather and said, "Before this heather blooms, I will be with you in Parliament." Friends, when I think of all the heather on the hilltops of our two nations that has flowered and withered these many years, as the mountains waited and our valleys pondered and prayed for their time, I am filled with hope that before the next decade sets on those hills, Wales and Scotland will be independent nations, taking our rightful place on the world stage. The old ways are breaking, but so is a new dawn, a dawn in this darkest of nights when our message of hope shines as a beacon to other peoples in the world who are striving to find their voice. People like the 9 brave campaigners in Catalonia who have today been jailed unjustly simply for delivering a democratic mandate. Raúl, Oriol, Jordi, Dolores, Carme, Jordi, Joaquim, Josep, Jordi. Plaid Cymru stands with you today, and from what Nicola Sturgeon has said, I know that SNP stands with you as well. They can imprison you, but they can't put an idea behind bars. Friends, you in Scotland have lit a candle for us. We follow it and carry it with us on the way, and together we look forward to that future that is so near at hand, a time that Hugh MacDiarmid foresaw when he wrote, "For we have faith in Scotland's hidden powers, the present's theirs, but the past and future's ours." Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dilith. What a start to the afternoon for us. Conference, if we can depart from our agenda for a little while, I would be grateful. This is one of my favourite parts of conference. Our SNP activists are at the very heart of everything we do as a party, and we truly do stand on the shoulders of giants. So I'm really pleased to welcome to the stage our President of the SNP, Ian Hudgton, who will present the President's Prize. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you, Convener. Fellow nationalists, the President's Prize, as you probably know, was instituted by Winnie Ewing when she was our President, and it was designed by her to enable us to give some recognition to members who have made exceptional contributions to the party, to our campaigns, and to the cause of independence. And I've never found it easy to limit to one winner per conference, because there are so many people out there across the country who have given and continue to give so much of the necessary work that we need to do to win our independence. However, I am confident that each year that I've had this responsibility, I have managed to narrow down, with some difficulty, to some outstanding winners, and this year is no exception. My winner joined the party, had his first membership card at the age of 18 in Inverness at the time, where he was working in a bank. But it was a wee bit later than that, 28 years ago to be exact, right here in Aberdeen, that he actually became an active member when an opportunity in the bank came up and the job moved to Aberdeen. The transformation from member to active member, many of you will recognise the scenario. Somebody chapped on his door. It was Ron Buchan in the case of Bridge of Don branch, who knocked on the door, got in conversation, and naturally the conversation extended to, would you like to become active? Luckily for us, the answer was aye, and he went to his first meeting in the Bridge of Don branch, and again, many of you will recognise the scenario, came away from that meeting having volunteered, I think, for a job. That's how I got started anyway. And that was an organisation. He's an organiser then, and quickly became central to the organisation role in Aberdeen North. And some 25 years, at least, he's worked in organisation here in Aberdeen, as well as in Nairn when he moved back a bit nearer to his Highland roots. The bank having offered early retirement in one of their many reorganisations. That was lucky for the SNP. John Robertson, some of you may already have guessed, is who I'm talking about. And John was election agent for the late Brian Adam, a great friend to many of us, when, under the guidance of Kevin Stewart, now MSP, the party here broke the stranglehold that the Labour Party had held over Aberdeen for far too long by winning Aberdeen North. And he's also been an election agent, John has, for many council by-elections over the years, both here and in the Highland region. He was the SNP agent for the whole Highland region in our referendum in 2014. But he tells me that being the election agent for 32 out of 33 council candidates in the Highland region in 2012 was the biggest challenge so far. The Highland region, Winnie Ewing was fond of telling colleagues in Brussels and Strasbourg, is bigger than Belgium in land area. Along with his wife, Lorraine, John Robertson has attended by-elections and been active across the country, attending conferences, national councils, everywhere. I'm sure if you don't know the name, you'll recognise the face when he comes up. And they've made many friends along the way. John's been a member of the National Organisation Committee. But let's not leave out the important role that fundraising plays in all of our branches and constituencies. And John has been heavily involved successfully in that as well, setting up the 50/50 Club here in Bridge of Don. And not only that, but the ultimate in voluntary, I think, activity for the SNP, hosting fundraising barbecues at his house. Now that, I think, is a serious commitment that we owe him a lot of thanks for. Race nights, bottle stalls, etc., etc. You know the drill. He's been involved in all of these and central to making a success of them too. When I mentioned John to Kevin Stewart this morning, Kevin said, and I quote, "He's an all-round cracking human being. Unfortunate he is to have the support of Lorraine in all that he has done for the cause." And I couldn't put it better myself. So I'm going to ask John to come up here and receive the President's Prize, which, as ever, can only be a token on behalf of you all of our thanks for the unreasonable demands that have been made of him and which he has, without fail, stood up and met. So thank you very much, John Robertson.
Thank you, Ian. To say that this is a shock is a huge understatement. I guess it's a sign that I must be knocking on a bit. I'm sure there are many members here and out with this hall who deserve this recognition a lot more than me, but I'm delighted to accept it nonetheless. I have to thank my wife, Lorraine, who's been a hard-working activist herself for many years and has put up with a house cluttered with leaflets, newspapers, posters, etc. for months on end. She loves it, really. And over the years, I have to say, I've worked with so many wonderful people, some no longer with us, people who have made this party what it is today. I hope you can indulge me, Mr. President, and allow me to plug a couple of charities I'm trustee and treasurer of. The Andrew de Murray Project and the Guardians of Scotland Trust. Now, many will not have heard of these charities. We're attempting to raise a statue to Wallace and Murray at the Old Stone Bridge in Stirling to commemorate the battle in 1297, and in particular remedy the fact that there is no statue to Andrew de Murray anywhere in the world. We only need to raise about £400,000. So please, please check out the Guardians of Scotland website Facebook page. You'll see on there the design of this statue, monument, whatever you want to call it. It's absolutely fantastic. It's like nothing you'll ever have seen before. It's well worth a look. And if you can help in any way, that would be great. I'd just like to, it's a bit cheeky, but if I may correct Ian on one small point. Ron Buchan is the guy that set up the 50/50 Club in Bridget-on, and I would not like to claim any credit for that. Ron's done a tremendous job with that. It's a money-making machine that's funded so many elections, so well done, Ron. I'd just like to wind up by reinforcing that this is not just a political party, not just a movement. This is a family. And if we stick together and support each other, we will win what we're all fighting for, independence for our nation. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Absolutely. Thanks, Ian.
Delegates, moving on to resolution number 11, which is the next item on our agenda, New Zealand Wellbeing Budget. This resolution will be moved by Tom Arthur, MSP, and seconded by Philippa Whitford, MP. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, Conference. It is a pleasure to move this resolution recognising New Zealand's groundbreaking achievement in delivering the world's first wellbeing budget. New Zealand's budget looks beyond conventional measures of economic performance, such as GDP. It takes a longer-term view of how spending decisions and policy can improve quality of life, both in the present and in the future. And, crucially, it also takes into account how those decisions will impact on future generations. Conference, while our friends and partners in New Zealand rightly grabbed the headlines earlier this year, Scotland has been at the forefront of developing the policies and tools to place wellbeing at the centre of our economic thinking for over a decade. Just as it was Scotland's Adam Smith who revolutionised economic thinking in the first industrial revolution, it is Scotland who leads in responding to the challenges and opportunities of the fourth industrial revolution. And those challenges and opportunities that are driven by innovation can only be met with innovation in our economic thinking, particularly in what we define as the purpose of economic policy. Until very recently, the question of how to achieve and increase economic growth was essential, perhaps even the fundamental consideration in political debate across the developed world. It became common to deem whether or not a country was successful almost entirely based on the rate and duration of economic growth. Now today, the latest economic statistics are still eagerly awaited, with some politicians and commentators all too ready to offer an interpretation that chimes with their political agenda but offers little that resonates with ordinary people. To some extent, this is to be expected. After all, we can't take the politics out of politics. More importantly, however, is the reality that many of these statistics, and in particular the most well-known of them, GDP, do not give us the full picture of the economic reality of a country, and worse, can mask huge inequalities, both economic and social. Conference, I do not think it is simply coincidence that it is in some of those countries where economic growth was the holy grail of policy making that the conditions of gross inequality and social injustice arose that have given birth to the discontent that fuels those populist movements of today that threaten democracy itself. This is a consequence of when adherence to economic doctrine leaves a government blind to the lived experience of its citizens. And as the pace of change quickens with the growth of automation and AI taking place as our population ages, it is more important than ever that the focus of economic thinking in advanced economies is on delivering tangible improvements to the lives of citizens, not simply on producing pleasing economic statistics every quarter. Conference, I stated that Scotland has been leading on developing a well-being economy. It is Scotland under an SNP government that is leading. From the launch of the first National Performance Framework in 2007, updated last year, to the co-founding of the group of well-being economy governments along with Iceland and New Zealand. Conference, I hope that you join me in backing this resolution and the City of Dunfermline Branch Amendment, recognising the achievement of one small independent country and supporting the work of what we are doing here in Scotland, a soon-to-be independent country. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. To second the resolution, we have Philippa Whitford MP, to be followed by Jean Ferguson to move the amendment. Philippa.
Thank you, Conference. I'm sure all of us would want to congratulate New Zealand on their well-being budget. But for many of you, today will be the first time that you have heard that Scotland was the founder of the Wellbeing Economy Government's global group, along with New Zealand and Iceland. This is something we have not been blowing our trumpet about, not nearly enough. Now, it's a simple fact that as we talk about climate change, we have to realise that we cannot keep on focusing and obsessing on GDP and growth, or we will eat the planet. You heard in the fraternal address how Wales is already moving to address the issue of future generations. And what I would like to see is for us to have an act here in Scotland focused on the well-being of current and future generations. Something that binds not just the Scottish Government, but local government and every single public body when they check decisions, at the moment they're checked against things like human rights. Why are they not checked against health and well-being? That's what's important to people. Now, many of you will know that the policies of the Scottish Government under the SNP have actually been well-being policies, from the baby box, expanding early learning, free tuition, prescriptions, and providing free personal care for our older citizens. These are all about the well-being of individual people. And I know from my time as a breast cancer surgeon, when I've walked that journey with my patients, there's only two things in life that are even remotely important. You will wish you had your health. You may look back and see how you wasted it in how you lived, or you may look back and wish that you had done things that now it's too late to have a shot at. But there is nothing more important to you than your health. And the only other important thing in life at all is the people you love. I have yet to meet a cancer patient worrying about their bank account, the size of their car, the size of their house, or the size of their business. So I would like to see us being radical when the manifesto for the 2021 election is being put together. Let's actually have an act which puts the well-being of our current generation, those of us who are alive now, but also our children and our grandchildren, as a responsibility of every single public body, that they need to make the decision not for a quick buck, not for an easy out, but looking at the long term of how we make Scotland that fairer, healthier country we all want to live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa. To move the amendment, we have Jean Ferguson. Jean is a first-time speaker, and conference, I have to tell you, it's Jean's birthday today. So, happy birthday, Jean.
Thank you. Hello, conference. This is certainly the most exciting and scary thing that I've ever done on my birthday. And I'm really going to deserve my glass of wine tonight. I passionately support this resolution, and I think the amendment will make it even stronger, and thanks, Tom, for agreeing. First, a test, audience. Hands up if you know what the Sustainable Development Goals are. Okay, not enough of you, and this is one of the things I want to change. Hands up if you'd heard of the Scottish National Performance Framework before it was mentioned just a few minutes ago. More? That's good. And anyone who's listened to Nicola's TED Talk will have heard about it. And if you haven't listened to Nicola's TED Talk, go out there and listen to it tonight, because it's wonderful. The Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, are 17 goals agreed by the UN in 2015 to address our global challenges. Things like poverty, inequality, climate change. They're built around the principle that no one is left behind. The UN set themselves a target of 15 years to achieve this, and the National Performance Framework has become Scotland's way of implementing the Sustainable Development Goals in our country. The NPF has 11 outcomes, and as a very new granny, my favourite is we grow up loved, safe and respected so that we can realise our full potential. There's a wonderful NPF website. If you haven't looked at it, please go. Scotland is developing indicators to show our progress, and many of them are up there now tracking our progress. So, why is it important that we link our budget to these outcomes? 5 reasons. 1, the outcomes are world-leading. Earlier this month, the OECD said the most developed outcomes-based approach by government anywhere in the world. 2, it will increase the visibility of the National Performance Framework within Scotland, so that next year, if someone asked the question, every hand would go up, and you would know that at home, your friends, your colleagues, and your neighbours all understood this for our country too. 3, it shows the world how serious we are about reducing inequalities and driving economic, environment, and social progress towards long-term sustainability. 4, it's critical that we direct our funds to the priorities we've agreed for our country. And 5, it just makes sense. Anything else would make it much harder for the Scottish Government to work towards our vision of an equal Scotland with a sustainable future. We're in good company with our amendment. In September this year, the Carnegie UK Trust made 7 useful recommendations about the NPF, and number 3 is that the framework should be linked to the budget process. I am so proud that Scotland is being a world leader along Iceland and New Zealand, and now Wales, as the well-being economy governments. We must clearly embed our commitment to sustainable well-being into our budget decisions. Please support the amendment and the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Our final speaker on this resolution in favour of the amendment will be Councillor Faye Sinclair. And Faye is also a first-time speaker. Welcome, Faye.
Thank you, Convener. Conference, if you'd told me a few months ago that I'd be standing here in Aberdeen speaking on a resolution about budgets, I would never have believed it. Numbers are not really my thing, but when those numbers represent investment in public services and reflect measurements of how well Scotland is meeting the needs and aspirations of our people, I think that's something that we can all feel passionate about. The City of Dunfermline branch submitted a resolution very similar to the one before us today, and we wholeheartedly support it. But we thought it was really important to make specific mention of Scotland's National Performance Framework and the vital role it plays in providing a clear vision for Scotland. The broad measures of national wellbeing cover a range of economic, health, social and environmental indicators that set out a vision for a successful Scotland based on values beyond simply measuring GDP. The framework was refreshed last year, as mentioned by Tom, and there are now a total of 81 indicators to be tracked by government, including on gender balance in organisations, the importance of secure work, and something that, as Fife's education convener and mum to 3 young sons, is very close to my heart: child wellbeing and happiness. So there's real power behind these numbers, and I want to quickly mention just one area where linking the Scottish budget to this framework can make a real difference. At its outset about 10 years ago, the National Performance Framework drew a focus to the importance of early years. There's an indicator that looks at the number of children reaching their developmental milestones by 30 months. But when digging into that data, it was discovered that only 65% of children were actually having those developmental milestone checks. So how could we know whether they were reaching them? Now the Scottish Government is supporting the delivery of a new universal health visiting service that gives families better access to health visitors and helps ensure that the health and well-being of preschool children. This is backed up by investment in 500 new health visiting posts across Scotland. I'm sure we're all well aware of the SNP's massive investment in early learning and childcare, with a doubling of free quality early learning provision, which will be delivered across Scotland by August next year. That's what I get really passionate about, so I could stand here and speak about that all day, so I'll have to stop now. But it is examples like these that demonstrate how well we are meeting the demonstrate the link between budgets and the National Performance Framework and the policies that will help us realise the vision we have for our nation, as well as making sure the budget investment is made where it will have the biggest impact. The data collected to measure outcomes against the indicators helps demonstrate how well we're meeting the wellbeing outcomes that are set out. That includes the one that Jean mentioned on children and young people, that we grow up loved, safe and respected, and that we realise our full potential. Conference, what could be more important than that? Please support the motion and amendment.
Thank you very much, Faye. Conference, we're not able to take any further cards on this resolution. Jean, do you wish to sum up in favour of the amendment? She's waiving her right to sum up. I know Tom is waiving his right to sum up. So we can then move on to the vote, delegates. So if we can deal firstly with the amendment and then with the resolution. So all those in favour of the amendment, first of all, if I can ask you to raise your cards. Thank you. Cards down. All those against the amendment, if you can raise your cards. The amendment passes unanimously. Thank you very much, delegates. And if I can move on to the resolution now. The resolution as amended. If you are in favour of the resolution as amended, please raise your cards. Thank you. Cards down. And if you are against the resolution as amended, please raise your card. The resolution as amended passes unanimously. Thank you, delegates. So we move on to resolution number 12 on developing maritime trade, to be moved by Drew Hendry MP and seconded by Roy Peterson. Welcome, Drew.
Always a fantastic site conference. Can I start by thanking Inverness City Branch and Roy Peterson, who you'll hear from shortly, for their expertise in putting this amendment to you. Conferences, Westminster continues its dance into the flames of Brexit. It's up to us to offer hope and vision to the people of Scotland. Now, it's time. It's time for us to take our place once more amongst the independent nation-states of the world. We must work with our EU partners and other progressive and outward-looking countries around the world to forge new and stronger social and trade links. Scotland has always reached out beyond our borders, across the seas, to build on our strong economic foundations, and now we must set the scene for the future social well-being of all the people of Scotland. Conference, 100 years ago, Scotland led the world in shipping. Our ports thronged with ships that access the far corners of the world. Today, Scotland still exports globally, but our ports only operate to a shadow of their potential. And why is that? Well, since being privatised by the Tories in the 1990s, they've been starved of investment. They're owned and mostly regulated by unaccountable offshore tax-avoiding entities. 3/4 of our international trade is now routed through the ports in the south of England. Conference, it costs almost as much to send a container from Glasgow to Southampton as it costs to send one from Southampton to Shanghai. We need to redevelop our ports and international shipping connections to serve Scotland's future needs. We have opportunities to realise around our coast. Serious plans are being made at Rosyth for services to the Netherlands, and the Clyde and Prestonpans are key ports with a great future. Among many other maritime assets, one such large opportunity sits on our most northern shores. Every day, the largest container ships pass through the Pentland Firth on the Great Circle route between North America and Northern Europe. The creation of a container transshipment hub at Orkney's Scapa Flow has the potential to generate up to £20 billion per annum to Scotland's trade. International investment would find this an exciting prospect. The opportunity to be the major container hub for Northern Europe, developed with the aim of streamlining trade, reducing overall carbon emissions. This would also dramatically improve the freight, rail and road connectivity in the far north. So instead of looking south for international connections, Scotland and Europe would look north. Conference, there are many other strategic projects that could be realised with modest investment through international tendering and concessions, led by a new Scottish Maritime Administration with the required expertise, just as they do in other independent and successful trading nations. The amendment you'll hear from SNP London branch is a good one, and I would urge you also to support that. Conference, Let's work to bring all of this together, all of this potential. Let's offer a prospectus for a truly globally connected Scotland, transform our ports, realise our maritime possibilities. Let's chart a route across the seas for our independent Scotland. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. And to second the resolution, Roy Peterson, who is a first-time speaker.
Conference. Drew Henry has stressed the importance of maritime trade to our nation's prosperity. I'd like to give one further example of how we can grow our international trade. To do this, as Drew said, we must rebuild our strategic international shipping connections. Strategic seaports are an essential starting point, a prime option, closest point in Scotland to the near continent has been identified as a new port at Preston Pans. On the site of the former Cockenzie power station, now ceased in operation, the site is now publicly owned by East Lothian Council. It can be developed rapidly and at relatively modest cost as a gateway port, firstly, to serve as an international motorways of the sea, and that's a European term, European project, motorways of the sea hub for continental Europe. And by the way, Preston Pans will boost, while it will boost Scotland's connectivity, an independent Scotland in the EU, as an EU member, can act as Ireland's land bridge to Northern Europe, so avoiding the customs complexities of Brexit England. Now, the second function, and this excites me very much, of this new port would be as a cruise ship hub. Currently, when cruise ships come into the Forth, calling at Edinburgh, Edinburgh tourism hub, the tourism hub of Scotland, they can't come alongside. Passengers, guests, have to be ferried ashore in tenders, a long and tedious process. The new port will enable the largest cruise ships to berth alongside, with ready access to the A1, rail connected also, easy access to Edinburgh and the borders. Preston Pans would then become a cruise turnaround port. We don't have that in Scotland, not in the Central Belt anyway. And that is to say, the main embarkation port for cruise guests and a supply hub for supplying the cruise ships with supplies, with food, drink, gifts, and so on, thereby boosting our exports and creating 1,000 jobs. Conference. The policy has been drafted. Scotland needs to develop its international seaports and shipping connections. To enable this, a trade-focused national maritime administration needs to be created and tasked to do just that. We need to start now. I call on conference to support this motion.
Thank you, Roy. Conference, I only have one card in to speak in favour of the amendment, so I need a seconder from the floor if I'm going to take that, which I see I have. Thank you very much. So, to speak in favour of the amendment, Gordon Miller, followed by Zara Pennington to speak in favour of the resolution. Gordon Miller.
Good afternoon, conference. So why have we suggested setting up a formal policy commission for this? I think having listened to the previous two speakers, it's fairly obvious this is possibly the most important, the most significant item on the conference agenda. And if we set up a formal policy commission, that gives us a mechanism to take the policy forward, and also gives us people who can advise on the implementation of the policy. It also shows a certain seriousness of intent, that we're taking the future of an independent Scotland seriously. And there's also potential benefits for any future independence referendum, because a commission, by its nature, has experts, specialists, who are able to provide credible cost and benefit analysis. They are able to provide a credible route map of how you get from here to there. And they should be able to produce something that you could even incorporate into any future independence white paper or blueprint. And when you consider that Scotland has something like 62%, I think the figure is, of the UK's offshore area, and there's vast amount of natural resources there, then credible figures for developing those resources and ports and shipping, they have two benefits. I mean, one is the obvious one for an independence referendum. It goes some way to countering the too small, too poor narrative. But also, if you think about it, if we are trying to negotiate with the EU in the future over fishing quotas or designated areas for natural energy production in the seas, then figures from a commission like this would also be useful. And the final thing I'd like to say is that if we set up something like this, they have the opportunity to take carbon neutrality into account from day one. And it would maybe be the first time that we'd have a policy developed where that was an integral part of it, where that was thought out as part of the plan. So we think in London branch that formalising this, that setting up a Maritime Policy Commission is very much a good thing. So I'd ask you to support the amendment and to support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Our final speaker in favour of this resolution is Zara Pennington. Zara is a first-time speaker. Welcome, Zara.
Good afternoon, conference. As some of you may know who attended the recent by-election in Shetland, I'm from Shetland. So you can immediately understand the relevance to where I'm coming from. If you came to Shetland, you'll realise that all our trade entirely comes by sea, and we're all equidistant from where we're sitting here in Aberdeen to Bergen in Norway. If you look at the map, a Nordic Circle political map, you'll see that Shetland, and indeed Scotland, is central to the Nordic Circle. The opportunity for Scotland to develop a beneficial trade policy, minimising carbon emissions by maximising the shipments of goods by efficient transport, not road hauling it to the south of England to be for onward shipment, will provide a great opportunity to meet our ambitious and world-leading carbon emissions targets. In moving on, we have the issue with Brexit. I appreciate, and I'm sure everyone else in conference does, the work that is going in to stop the current attempts of Boris Johnson to leave the European Union. But as we've noticed from our friends in Ireland, if Brexit takes place and we rejoin the European Union, there is the risk of some kind of border. Now, if we have developed our ports and had the opportunity to do this, we have independent trade access to our continental markets, and via that to the wider world. To ensure the stability of our economy, whatever may happen with Brexit, I urge you to support the resolution and the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Zara. Delegates, we're running a bit behind time, so I'd be grateful if the movers would waive their rights to sum up. I think somebody's waving at me, so I think that's okay. Thank you very much. If we can move on to vote on the amendment, first of all. If I can ask all those in favour of the amendment to please raise their cards. Thank you. Cards down. All those against, please raise your cards. Thank you. The amendment is passed overwhelmingly. If I can now move on to voting on the resolution as amended. All those in favour of the resolution as amended, please raise your cards. Thank you. Cards down. All those against, please raise your cards. The resolution as amended is passed unanimously. Thank you, delegates. Delegates, we now move on to the first of our topical resolutions, firstly on Catalonia. I have a point of order on the topic from Morgan Davies, if Morgan would like to make his way to the podium, and if Valentina Cervera and Councillor Jordan Linden can be ready to speak following that. So firstly, a point of order from Morgan Davies.
I now can't read what the resolution says, but I think when it was read out and what I heard before was a reference to the prisoners being convicted of rebellion. Is that what the resolution says?
The resolution says rebellion.
They were not convicted of rebellion. They were convicted of sedition, and there is a difference. And if we're going to offer solidarity to them, we should make it clear that it is sedition and not rebellion.
Okay, that's helpful, Morgan. Thank you. I think we thank Morgan for that point of order and move on to the debate. We may hear further about that from the mover and the seconder. So this topical resolution is to be moved by Valentina Cervera and seconded by Councillor Jordan Linden. And Valentina is a first-time speaker.
Hello, conference. Bon dia, delegats i delegades. Today is a sad day for democracy. Today, Spain once again has proven that Franco's spirit is running the country. Conference, as a Catalan New Scot, I love Scotland. I am Scottish. But I can never forget who I am and where I'm coming from. My country has been sentenced because they haven't only imprisoned our leaders, they have imprisoned our ideas and all of us. They are not alone because we will stand by them until we can finally see Catalonia being a free country. I will always remember seeing my people lifting their hands up in their most pacifist way while police were beating us up with rage. Very inclusive police, I have to say. It didn't exclude anyone. Didn't matter if you were a child, gay, women. They beat up everyone who was on their way. Conference, Spain has never been a democratic state. Our transition after the dictatorship was more a transaction than anything else. I remember as a child, my mother telling me, with happiness the day that our dictator Francisco Franco died. Little did she know that 30 years later, he will still be running the country. Freedom activists and politicians, they have been sentenced to prison. Oriol Junqueras, someone that I see as a mentor for me, is going to be behind bars for 13 years for a crime that he didn't commit. Jordi Cuixart, a political activist, not even a politician, his second son was born while he was in jail. He has missed his first steps, his first word, his first years of their lives, and he's probably not going to be able to hug him until he is a teenager. Conference, this is not anymore about whether Catalonia should be independent or not. May I add, it should. But this is about basic human rights. They are playing with families, they are playing with dreams, they are imprisoning ideas. President Sassoli, European Union, when are you going to stop this? When are you going to stop fighting with the oppressor? Fight for democracy. Dear friends, this is not a faraway scenario. This is happening right in front of our eyes. If it's happening now, what's stopping other countries to do the same? We better not be giving Boris Johnson any more ideas, or who knows what's going to happen to us. A few years ago, the Clara Ponsati case was raised up in conference, and I couldn't be more grateful for the support and solidarity you showed to her and to my country. I'm asking you to do this again. The fight is not over, and seems like it's nowhere near being over. I'm not going to lie. I'm an emotional wreck today. Seeing your people that you admire and love being in jail is hard to deal with. The 1st of October of 2017 was one of the scariest days I've ever lived. For us, it was meant to be a historic day, a day of celebration, a day that will mark history. Instead, it ended up being a bloodbath. It ended up being one of the days they will mark as the darkest day in history of Catalonia. The Catalan people have asked for a referendum. Our politicians delivered. I am too guilty of those charges. I am too a rebel. I am too guilty of sedition. You can imprison people, but you will never be able to imprison freedom or ideas. Conference, everyone in this room is dreaming about independence. But unfortunately for some, it's not coming at a free cost. If we don't stand up now, what's going to help others to stand up when they are coming after us? Because there will be nobody left. Conference, please support this motion for them, for their families, for Catalonia, and for democracy. Soar Alba and Visca Catalunya. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Valentina. To second this resolution, we have Councillor Jordan Linden. Jordan.
How do you follow that, Conference? Conference, on the 1st of October 2017 at 10 p.m, I stood in a polling place preparing for the close of the ballot in Catalonia. This was like no other electoral experience for me. People linked their arms and formed a human barrier over the front of a polling place, with shouts that the Guardia Civil, the Spanish police, were coming down the street, closing down the polling place. The fear was palpable. People did not want their democratic exercise to be disrupted. It was sheer humanity before my eyes. And this came at the end of a day where I'd already seen the violence that had been enacted towards the people of Catalonia by the state, where I had seen the aftermaths of a police visit to a polling place. And we ask ourselves this: why? Why is this happening? Within the EU, why were people being bludgeoned? Why were people being dragged? And why were people's human rights being trampled on before our eyes? Yet here we are, now, almost 2 years on to the day that that referendum took place, and we're faced with yet another abhorrent display by the Spanish state. Today, the Spanish courts have condemned former members of the Catalan government, including, as Valentina said, Oriol Junqueras, as well as the former president of the Catalan parliament, Carme Forcadell, to 13 years and 11.5 years, respectively. Their crime? Organising a referendum to have Catalonia decide its future. And for Carme, the president of the parliament, just allowing a debate on independence. Conference, how can we sit back and watch on in a world as people are imprisoned for standing up for their right to self-determination? This trial has been set against a political backdrop, and today we see that, with sentences that aren't about justice, they're about vengeance and punishment for daring to pursue the right to self-determination. And what has the international response been? What has the response of the European Union been? Conference, I'm just back from Brussels. I'm a proud European, and I'm so proud that this party, the SNP, are fighting Brexit with every fibre of our being. But today's response from the European Commission, I'm sorry to say, is nothing short of a disgrace. To say that it had no comment to make on the decision in a political trial and that the Commission respects the decision is shocking. The way forward for Catalonia, Conference, is not a prison sentence. It's not silencing people. It's for dialogue and negotiation, respecting Catalonia, respecting its right to self-determination. What has happened today is a sham for justice that does not progress a solution but creates further tension and division. Conference, we, the YSI, our sister party in the European Free Alliance, are today calling for an amnesty for these political prisoners and for the restoration of dialogue. That can be the only way forward for Catalonia. But Conference, fundamentally, this issue is about self-determination. That's what's at its core. And Conference, we in the SNP will never waver in defending the right to self-determination. Never. Conference, support Catalonia, support the resolution, Libertat presos politics.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, delegates. Delegates, we have a lot of cards in to speak on this resolution, and I'm sorry we don't have time to hear from more of you. Before we move to a vote, however, just to revert to that initial point of order, we are able to amend this resolution from the floor to replace the word rebellion with the word sedition. And on that basis, delegates, as there are no cards in against the resolution, can I ask if this is passed by acclaim? Thank you, Conference. So we move to our second topical resolution on improving gypsy and traveller lives. This will be moved by Christina McKelvey, MSP, and seconded by Kevin Stewart, MSP. Welcome, Christina.
Conference, that's what our party's all about, isn't it? Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for accepting this topical resolution today, because it is indeed topical, and it's something that we just managed to get organised and launched last week. Can I start with saying some thanks to some people? Can I make sure that Conference realises that the journey for this action plan started with Angela Constance at MSP, and we pay tribute to her for her work? Can I say a grateful thanks to Councillor Eleanor Whittam, who was a COSLA representative, because this is a labour of love between the Scottish Government and COSLA. And we don't also always get to say that, but it absolutely is. So Councillor Whittam too. Can I also thank the Gypsy Traveller community in Scotland, who told us a few years ago nothing about us without us, so we made sure they were at the heart of everything that we do. Conference, a few years ago I was chairing the Equality Human Rights Committee, and this charismatic young man came along to committee to talk about realising rights in Scotland. His name was David Donaldson. He's a Gypsy traveller from Aberdeenshire, a local boy. And he said at that committee that day that discrimination against Gypsy travellers was the last acceptable form of racism in Scotland. And we decided that day that we would not be the last acceptable form of discrimination, of racism against Gypsy travellers in Scotland. So, where did we get to? We thought we need some action. The Parliament had come up with a number of reports before. Callie Annie Lyle, who was the race advisor to the Scottish Government, gave us some ideas on how we do that. So we decided to do a joint action plan between the community, the Scottish Government and COSLA, and that's what was launched. Absolutely proud to launch it just last week with all of those people in the room. We funded a brilliant organisation called the Women's Voices Project. Gypsy traveller women raising their voice and getting involved and telling us what they needed. Nothing about us without us. We funded Article 12 for the Youth Assembly. Guess who was involved in that? Yeah, that charismatic young man, David Donaldson. And by goodness, has he got a lot of things to tell us and what we need to do next. And we welcome every single word of it. We funded our young people to go to Auschwitz, our Gypsy traveller young people to go to Auschwitz. Why did we do that? And many people in this room realise that the first people murdered at Auschwitz were Gypsy, traveller, Roma people. Very many of us don't, and we need to make sure our young people understand that. But when we talk about a fairer Scotland, what do we mean, Conference? What do we actually mean? We mean a fairer Scotland for every single person who calls Scotland home. So our action plan has got 4 key points: better and more culturally sensitive accommodation, better representation, better understanding and support from our public services, and a say on the decisions that get made on their behalf in our government. Delegates, I can't tell you how proud I am to have launched that action plan, to remember all of the people who helped us on that journey, but that journey has only just took its first steps. We have a number of years to make sure we realise this. I'm putting timescales on it. Every 6 months I'll be having a check-up to make sure that we're making that progress. And that's why it's incredibly important that we do that. But, you know, it wasn't just me alone. We worked across the whole of government because we realised the whole of government had something to say in this. So I need to thank Joe Fitzpatrick, Marie Todd, Jamie Hepburn, and Kevin Stewart, who's coming up to speak soon, so you'll hear what he's got to say on this as well, because this was a labour of love across government. It was the real, true endeavour of your government realising a fairer Scotland, not just for our Gypsy travellers, but for everybody else. And finally, just one action. Look at all of the actions. There's 33 of them, and some of them are just absolutely fantastic. But just one action, the right to health. And many people in this room can turn up at their general practitioner and say, I've got the right to health. We all do it, don't we? If you're a Gypsy traveller, you couldn't, because there wasn't that information wasn't available to them. One tiny wee thing we did, Joe Fitzpatrick came up with a great idea. We gave them a card that says, I have the right to health. I have the right to get the right support. And do you know what we realised? That card could be used for people who find themselves in a homeless situation or people who are refugees. So not just for our valued community in the Gypsy Traveller community, but for other people in Scotland who would maybe not understand the right to health. Now they do, and we're incredibly proud of that. Another thing that we're doing is recognising the Gypsy Traveller culture and the great richness it brings to Scottish society. So from now on, we will be celebrating Gypsy Traveller History Month across the whole of Scotland. And next year, we will be having that party in Edinburgh Castle. Because we have to ensure that a fairer Scotland means it's fairer for every single person in Scotland. And that's not just for the settled community, but that's for our travelling community as well. We're incredibly proud of this piece of work. You should be too. Please take the message out there. Fairer Scotland means for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. And to second the resolution, Kevin Stewart, MSP.
Good afternoon, Conference, and welcome to the great city of Aberdeen. And I hope you enjoy Conference here. And this hall is a matter of just a couple of miles from the Clinterty Gypsy Traveller site here in this city. At this moment, that site doesn't meet the minimum standards that are required by the Scottish Housing Regulator. And I do hope that the people in Aberdeen City Council get the finger out and ensure that that site is brought up to standard. Scotland has a great tradition in terms of gypsy travellers, and a lot of people do not know the history of that community or some of the shining stars that there have been who have come from the Gypsy Traveller community. I don't know if there are any Bob Dylan fans in the audience here today, but Jeannie Robertson, a Northeast Gypsy Traveller, was one of the greatest influences on Bob Dylan. Who knew that? Not many, because we don't talk about the culture of Gypsy Travellers and the rich heritage that they have brought to Scotland often enough. We've been doing a lot of that in the Ministerial Working Group, and I'd like to put on record my thanks too to those folks who have been involved in this journey. As Christina rightly pointed out, Angela Constance played a key role in this. Many other ministerial colleagues have also served in that group, and Eleanor Whittam, who's our deputy leader in East Ayrshire and the COSLA spokesperson, has been at the forefront of the work that we have done. I'd also like to pay tribute to Davy Donaldson and all of the people from the Gypsy Traveller community who have been involved in all that we have done. Now, Christina talked about the action plan, and I noticed in the audience that David Torrance was sitting with an action plan beside him, and I hope that every MSP will have a good read and ensure that we live up to everything that's in that plan. But it's not just about the plan itself, it's also about investment. That action plan is backed by £3 million worth of investment, including £2 million to develop culturally appropriate housing and to bring those sites up to the right standards. And I'm very proud that this government has committed to the resources to doing so. We want to create a fairer Scotland, and we want to create a fairer Scotland for all. David Donaldson did say that last bastion of acceptable racism was aimed at Gypsy Travellers. Let's send a message out from this conference today that no racism is acceptable. It is completely and utterly unacceptable. And back this motion by acclaim, please.
Thank you, Kevin. Delegates, I'm sorry I can't take any further cards. I know there were others who wanted to speak on this topical resolution as well. There are no cards in against the resolution, so can I ask delegates if you are happy to pass the resolution by acclaim? thank you, Conference. Given that time is a bit against us today, we're not going to be able to deal with our Kashmir emergency topical today. However, the Conferences Committee will prioritise that so that it is on the agenda for tomorrow. So we will come back to that. So delegates, moving on with our agenda, I'd like you to give a very warm welcome to the podium to our MSP for Perthshire North, our Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills, our Deputy First Minister, John Swinney, MSP.
Friends, we stand in what is the SNP's Festival of Democracy, our annual conference. Over 3 days, we will debate the major issues facing our society today. Climate justice, an issue of vital importance to us all, but one that has motivated such action by young people across the world. The tragedy of drug dependence and the need for concerted action to tackle it. The plight of the Kurdish people abandoned by the US government. Kashmir, pensions, energy, economic development, and countless other issues. And of course, we have just a few minutes ago debated, with incredible power, the issue of Catalonia. Conference, I'm a government minister. I understand very well the importance of respecting the courts. And this party understands very well the importance of the rule of law. Just look at the fine work of Joanna Cherry. But I am proud. But I'm proud that our party will not stand by in silence as the Spanish system condemns Catalan leaders to jail for years. They stood up. The Catalans stood up for democracy. They stood for the basic right of self-determination. That should not be a crime. I stand with Catalonia. Conference, in an age of alternative facts and fake news, of Donald Trump and Boris Johnson, we should make no apology for standing up for democratic human rights, for holding to a higher standard. We are not simply seeking to win independence. We are seeking to win independence for a purpose, to build a nation for all those who choose to live here. A nation that supports the vulnerable and helps them play a full part in our society. A nation that generates wealth that will help us create a fairer country. A nation that can take its place at the top international table and hold its head up high. Friends, independence opens the door to being that nation, and today we stand on the threshold of our country's independence. While we, not surprisingly, deride their behaviour, we must learn the lessons of the victories of Trump and Johnson. They chose and still choose the gutter, and it will be their downfall. Winning on their terms is never worth it. Their road does not lead to a better nation. Their road leads to ruin, and we will never, ever walk that road. Instead, we will walk the road of tolerance, persuasion, debate, and dialogue. We will set ourselves the goal of living every day as though we are in the first days of a new nation. We do so for two simple reasons. First, because it's the right thing to do. And second, because it will truly make our country anew. It is right that we bring people together, old Scots and new Scots, rich and poor, young and old. We will fight for their right to be heard, to take part in the great national question at the heart of our political debate, whether or not we agree with their view. We will celebrate the diversity of our country and see it for the strength that diversity truly is. And it will make our country anew because we must always believe we are living in the first days of a new nation. When the history books come to be written, I believe these days will be seen as the moment Scotland took control of our own path. Faced with the choice between independence and the UK of Brexit and Boris Johnson, people are choosing independence. They are rejecting the lies of the populace and holding fast to the shared values of truth, integrity and honesty. They are holding fast to simple principles, principles like no one, not even those in power, are above the law. Johnson and Trump choose lies and division. We choose to live as though in the first days of a new nation. They choose fear, we choose hope, and we will win. We will win our independence and our better nation. That challenge to build a better nation is at the heart of your SNP government. Every day is a day when your government acts as if we are in the early days of a new nation. Record health funding, hundreds of new school buildings, record numbers of Scots going to university, and record numbers from the poorest backgrounds too. Some of the lowest unemployment levels on record, crime down, police numbers up, and progressive reform of our justice system. New benefits lifting people out of poverty, world-leading climate change legislation, all of this and so much more has been done. The contrast with our opponents could not be more stark. While they are busy vandalising our economic future and making us an international laughingstock, your SNP government has been busy building the new Scotland of tomorrow. And in the next year, we will see so much more done. For Scotland's children, we will see not one, but two absolutely transformational policies delivered next year. Early learning and childcare will double from next August. That doesn't just massively reduce the cost of childcare for parents to the tune of £4,500 a year. It will not just mean parents have the time and the money to take on a job, but it will also radically change the life chances of thousands of our most vulnerable children. 30 hours a week, high-quality early learning, provided free. That is transformative change from your SNP government. And by Christmas next year, the Scottish Child Payment will begin. It will deliver £10 per week per child to low-income families, helping around 170,000 of the most vulnerable children. Poverty campaigners called that policy a game changer. Two bold and radical policies next year alone to benefit the children of our country. Friends, your SNP government is already building the better nation we aspire to be for our young people. All of this work will build on the outstanding efforts that are underway to close the poverty-related attainment gap in education. If we want to create a fair and prosperous future for our nation, we must ensure every one of our young people are able to make their full contribution to that effort. We have to recognise that children who live in poverty face greater obstacles in pursuing their education. So our Scottish Attainment Challenge, £750 million in Scottish Government investment, is providing the essential support those young people need. At the same time, our investment in pupil equity funding is putting power into the hands of our head teachers and their schools to do all that needs to be done to help those young people. And with the support of the Finance Secretary, we've been able to give schools added confidence to tackle the attainment challenge by continuing that challenge for longer than originally expected, with an extra year of support promised until 2022. Our mission is to make that life-transforming intervention for the benefit of young people. It is the right thing to do. The attainment gap is closing. We are building the future of our country. All of these efforts are about tackling child poverty. And last week, someone else made a speech about child poverty. Gordon Brown broke his silence, again, and decided to share with us his wisdom. And his idea was breathtaking. He proposed that a delegation, cross-party no less, go to London and beg Boris Johnson's Treasury for more money. His only answer to poverty is to try to reason with a reckless Tory government that cares nothing about child poverty and hope I tell you, to get some scraps from the Tory table. And that sums up the difference between Gordon Brown and the Unionist parties and our party and the independence cause. They care more about protecting the Union than they do about child poverty. We want independence to enable us to eradicate child poverty. Theirs is not a plan. The solutions to Scotland's problems do not lie in London. The people who can solve those problems are not Tory politicians in the Treasury. The people who must find and fund those solutions are the people who make their futures here in Scotland. The answer lies not in begging for some help from London, but in the talents and the energies of our own nation. Unlike Gordon Brown's abdication of responsibility, we don't need or want anyone else to solve our problems. We simply want people like Gordon Brown and the Tory Treasury to get out of our way and let us get on with the job. Conference, that is the reality of independence. It's not a promise of a shortcut to success. It's not the promise of sunlit uplands, but is rooted in a belief in the talents of our people. We are endowed with the talents and resources to tackle our problems. We have the skills, we have the means. What we need are all of the powers, the freedom to get on with the job. That is the promise of independence. Conference, the challenge that faces our nation became more stark since we last met in Edinburgh. Then, Brexit under Theresa May was a tragedy. Now, under Boris Johnson, it has quickly turned to a farce. Let's get Brexit done, do or die. That's their slogan. That's their whole plan. It's easy to lose sight amidst the buffoonery of the Prime Minister that Brexit under Johnson is not just a farce, it is a deadly farce. Deadly for people relying on medicines to stay healthy. Deadly, in the words of the UK government's own chief medical advisor, Dame Sally Davis, who last week said that people will die if the UK presses ahead with a no-deal Brexit. Take a moment to think about that. That wasn't a campaign group or an opposition party indulging in rhetorical flourish. That was the UK government's most senior medical advisor. Now, I know that the Leave campaign got a bit fed up with listening to experts, but to take a cavalier attitude to the significant warnings of a chief medical advisor is, for Boris Johnson, surely a reckless step too far. Friends, I'm responsible for the Scottish Government resilience response to Brexit. And I have to level with you, as I levelled with the country last week. We are doing everything in our power to mitigate the impacts of a no-deal Brexit. We are straining every sinew alongside councils and police and so many others. Plans have been put in place to keep people safe. But I cannot stand here and tell you that everything is going to be all right, because it is not. No deal will cost thousands of jobs, disrupt supplies of food and medicine, and destroy the most vital supply chains in our economy. Boris Johnson is a clown, but no deal is not funny. It is deadly serious, no deal will cost lives, and no rational Prime Minister should contemplate inflicting a no-deal Brexit on this country. Friends, the experience of Brexit is taking Scotland to a tipping point. The Sunday Times poll yesterday had yes and no neck and neck. By a significant margin, our fellow citizens believe Scotland will be stronger economically as an independent member of the European Union than as a part of the United Kingdom. Step by step, we are winning the argument. We know it, and it makes us impatient. All of us, believe you me. But there is no shortcut. There is no magic policy or political wheeze that can change the task ahead of us. One by one, we must persuade our families, our friends and our neighbours of our cause. One by one, step by step. It takes effort, it takes patient persuasion, and we can see that it is working. I saw a vivid example of this in recent weeks. I spent quite a bit of time in Shetland during the recent by-election campaigning and also appreciating once again the beauty of the Shetland Islands. I saw our magnificent candidate, Tom Wills, lead a campaign of patient persuasion that Tom Wills led a campaign of patient persuasion that shattered the Lib Dem majority, increased our vote by 50%, and delivered a 14-point swing to the SNP. I was captivated by Tom's campaign of patient persuasion, laying the foundations to win in Shetland next time round. Well done, Tom, on a campaign superbly well fought. But I was captivated by something else in that campaign too. Our campaign was strengthened by the energetic, optimistic and hopeful contribution of the Young Scots for Independence, who travelled in great numbers to Shetland to work incredibly hard to help our campaign. To those young people, I say this: thank you for your efforts. You're a credit to yourselves, a credit to this party, and the source of the greatest hope for the future of our movement. Friends, we know we must be winning when we pick up a newspaper or listen to yet another unionist politician trying to move the goalposts. Their transparent attempts to fix the result of the next referendum, and there will be one, is not born out of confidence. It is born out of a growing certainty that they cannot win on the strength of their arguments. They are desperate to cry foul because they can no longer win on their own merits. That should give our party and our movement great confidence as we move forward. At the very moment that the British state is imploding, at the very moment Europe is ready to welcome Scotland as an equal member in our own right, at the tipping point of history, and as our cause comes into its majority, we must hold our nerve and hold to our values. If we do that, we will win the debate, we will win new supporters, and we will succeed in winning our country's independence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Conference. We now move on to number 13 in our agenda, a resolution on state pensions in an independent Scotland. This resolution to be moved by Patrick Johnson and seconded by Chris Hanlon. And Patrick is a first-time speaker. Welcome, Patrick.
Good afternoon, Conference. Conference, the UK state pension is ranked the lowest in the developed world. This is according to the 2017 OECD report looking into pensions. The study calculated that the typical British worker would at retirement receive a state pension and other benefits worth around 29% of what they had previously earned. We were beaten by Mexico on 29.6%, just, Poland on 38%, and Chile on 40%. You could have doubled the UK state pension and still not have met the OECD average of 63% or the EU average of 70%. The best-ranked developed countries for state pensions included France on 74%, Denmark on 80%, and the Netherlands on 100%. The UK on 29% is simply a national embarrassment in comparison. Conference. The UK's government record on state pensions doesn't look like improving anytime soon. Many WASPy women have been badly stung by the equalisation of the state pension retirement age, some losing over £40,000. And changes to pension credit now require both partners to be over the state pension age. This could cost some £7,000 a year. Furthermore, a Conservative think tank has recently suggested moving the state pension retirement age to 75. Conference, our state pension is not safe in the hands of a UK Conservative government. The UK having the lowest ranked state pension should lead many to wonder, can an independent Scotland do better? Well, we could hardly do worse. Conference, with independence, Scotland can choose differently as to how we tax and spend and how we go about delivering a better state pension. Staying in the UK is only going to see our state pension get further eroded and get further away. An independent Scotland that values our people and their well-being is preferable to being trapped inside a UK that values billionaires and their tax havens. So, Conference, let us today support the commissioning of a Scottish state pension plan, and let's target the OECD average of 63% as the minimum for a Scottish state pension and deliver financial security and well-being to the pensioners of an independent Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. To second the resolution, we have Chris Hanlon, followed by Graham McCormick to move the direct negative. Welcome, Chris.
Afternoon, Conference. I was very pleased to be asked to second this resolution, as I only really stumbled into being involved with it by accident. I'm very keen to promote branches and grassroots members that are developing policy ideas, and I think every idea deserves a chance to be heard and debated by Conference. So I'm very pleased to have played any part, however small, in getting this resolution onto the agenda today. I hadn't actually intended to speak today. I'm sure most of you are fed up of hearing from me by now. But the movers were generous enough to ask me to second, and the more I read it, the more I liked it as a resolution. Those who have put in their shift and left the workforce are often overlooked by policymakers, and I can't help but feel that the 2014 White Paper left a lot to be desired from the point of view of pensioners. That was definitely an oversight on our part, as the evidence suggests that it was precisely that demographic that voted heavily for the status quo and might well have decided the outcome. Those living day-to-day on fixed incomes are often rightly concerned about economic upheavals or shocks, Not only did we not do enough to reassure them that we would protect their incomes after independence, we missed the opportunity to offer them a convincing reason to be in favour of independence. A pension is not some benefit that the state gives people out of the goodness of its heart. Rather, it is a right, deferred payment for labour that benefited all of the rest of society over several decades. It is returned to an individual when they eventually leave the workforce. A pension should allow an individual to live in dignity and comfort without having to fear that being taken away from them. What this resolution does is give us an opportunity to fight the next referendum on a platform that recognises the concerns of pensioners and offers them a future to aspire to as a valued part of an independent Scotland. A newly independent Scotland will have options for deploying its ludicrously abundant resources in such a way as to give pensioners a reason to vote for independence rather than against it. Once we are free to set our own social justice priorities, we should not just aspire to offer our pensioners an average pension for an OECD member, but to aspire to lead the league table of OECD members within a decade or so. We would and should guarantee that in an independent Scotland, the government would ensure that nobody ever lost out because of exchange rate fluctuations. The decision as to how much dignity to offer our pensioners in retirement is a political choice for fiscally independent countries. And this resolution would give us the opportunity to choose to go even further by emulating our Scandinavian neighbours. We might even consider the possibility of beginning to reduce the retirement age for everyone. Oddly, I don't recall the subject of pensions coming up yesterday at the Social Justice and Fairness Fringe, but I know it will be a subject that the Commission will consider. I think this is a golden opportunity to develop a pension policy that will make independence appear like a very attractive opportunity to our retired community instead of looking like an enormous risk. Thank you. Support the resolution.
Thank you, Chris. To move the direct negative, we have Graham McCormack, to be followed by Anne Rendell, speaking in favour of the resolution. Welcome, Graham.
Delegates, could I first of all pay tribute to Patrick? He and his brother Kevin have been a breath of fresh air in the Helensburgh branch, and they do a power of work. So congratulations, Patrick, on your maiden speech here. But they're part company with them in connection with pensions. I recently, after 50 years contributions, I recently received my first basic pension. It's a con. Basic pensions are a con. National contributory pensions are a con, and I'll tell you why. The establishment which set them up factored in that a very, very large percentage of the population would never benefit from them, and generally these were people in manual labour. In addition to that, even like me, if you've managed to get your first pension, you don't know when your last is going to be, so basically they've factored in the fact that people who have paid considerable amounts of money into these pension contributions might never get as much back as they put in. Now, an alternative funding for pensions is taxation. And let's face it, national insurance contributions are just a tax. Pensions currently are reserved, but people of a certain age can't wait for independence because they are really struggling. People in fixed incomes are really struggling. So we've got to devise a system whereby they can benefit now. And without detracting from the various benefits which the Scottish Government, have introduced to help, the thing is, they are not the only people The older people are not just the only people who can't wait. The veterans can't wait. Children in poverty can't wait. Young people with mental health problems that have got to give up their jobs can't wait. Struggling artists and creatives can't wait. Homeless people can't wait. With different work patterns, all of us may well find that we are dependent on some form of support from the state. But the answer is a meaningful, universal citizens' income. Shall we start at £200 a week for every man, woman and child, which is significantly more than the current basic state pension? It's affordable, and actually it is within our existing devolved powers. An annual ground rent on all urban land and floor space could raise £52 billion, which is the amount that would be required, at £3.50 per square metre of these land types. The crusty vote is one that we must win. Put money in their pockets. Put money in everyone's pockets. And that will drive the wedge between us and the United Kingdom so that the independence will be irresistible. So I beg you to reject this motion and think in terms of a universal citizens' income for everyone so that all who need it have it when they need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. The final speaker we are able to take on this resolution is Anne Rendell. Anne is a first-time speaker. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you, Conference. I just wanted to briefly speak in favour of the motion and to mention the recent efforts of various campaigning groups representing 50s-born women, which has already been mentioned, who have suffered a rise in their state pension age of up to 6 years, in order that the UK government achieved their stated aim of equalising the state pension age for men and women. Unfortunately, so far, these groups have been unable to secure a remedy in law. The judgment handed down by a recent judicial review on this issue supported the UK government's claims that they had acted correctly in bringing changes to the state pension age and rejected the grounds on which the claimants disputed this. However, Feisty Women, a charity based in Dundee, of which I'm the co-founder, is seeking a different route to justice. Unlike the other groups, we don't believe that the clock can be turned back simply because women feel they've been unfairly treated. It's clear from this judicial review that regardless of whether women feel the increase in pension age was morally wrong, under the letter of the law, the government is seen to have acted properly. So, Conference, this is a plea to our SNP government to remember the 50s-born women as well when discussing pensions and to support Feisty Women's continuing fight for justice, which may involve a Scottish judicial review. And as we all know, Scottish law appears to be more sensible, so hopefully more likely to succeed. But with that said, I'm happy to support the motion and look forward to seeing a Scottish state pension which enables all those who make it to pension age, if we don't get killed off before that by this other government, not to be condemned to the poverty level it's at just now under this UK government. Thank you for your time, Conference.
Thank you very much, Anne. So delegates will move to the summing up in relation to this resolution. Graham, do you wish to sum up for the direct negative, or do you wish to waive your right to sum up? He's right there. Here he comes.
Thank you, Conference. Could I just say that if you're not persuaded with what I've said yet, could you still vote for the direct negative? Stay in Aberdeen a couple of extra nights, because I'm speaking on those in Afford on Wednesday and Kemney on Thursday in greater detail, and I'm sure you'll be persuaded. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Can I ask if Patrick Johnson wishes to sum up for the resolution or to waive his rights? Here comes Patrick. Thank you, Patrick.
Hi, Conference. Scotland doesn't have to suffer UK government pension tax on our state pension. We can choose differently. Universal basic income sounds great to us political geeks. Good luck selling that to pensioners on the doorstep. They don't get it, but they do understand their state pension. So conference, support this resolution. Make it party policy. Reject the direct negative, and let's get independence won.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, delegates. We'll now move on to voting on this resolution then. So if I can first ask all those delegates in favour of the resolution to please raise your cards. Okay, thank you. Cards down. All those against the resolution, please raise your cards. Thank you. Cards down. So the resolution passes overwhelmingly. Thank you very much, delegates. Conference will now move on to Resolution 14, Protecting Our Human Rights. This will be moved by Christina McKelvey, MSP, and seconded by Alec Kerr. Welcome, Christina.
Hello, conference. It's me again. Talking about rights again. My favourite hobby horse. The Human Rights Act and the European Convention of Human Rights came from a very dark place post-war. And there's a few articles in those acts that are incredibly important. The right to have your rights realised is one. The right to life, the right to freedom from torture and inhumane or degrading treatment, the right to freedom from slavery, the right to liberty and security, the right to a fair trial. And how interesting is that given the Catalonia situation that we've just experienced? Conference, our party and your government believes that human rights of our Scottish people are entitled to the basic rights and freedoms contained within both the Human Rights Act and the ECHR. We want to create an inclusive Scotland that protects, respects, promotes and implements internationally recognised human rights. Jean Freeman and Shirley-Ann Somerville have done an amazing job ensuring the rights of our people are firmly embedded in our new Scottish Social Security Agency, where dignity, fairness and respect is the foundation stone in which we build our new public services. My colleague Alex Kerr will give you some details about the history and threats to our fundamental rights when he gets up to speak. But I wanted to focus on letting you know what your SNP government is doing to ensure that our rights are enshrined, embedded and advanced to protect our people and keep pace with our European neighbours and organisations, especially maybe in a post-Brexit world. So, conference, actions, because I like actions. Your Scottish Government is currently embedding human rights into the day-to-day business of government, working to fulfil international obligations and contribute via the UN and the Council of Europe, protecting human rights by opposing the UK Government's proposals to replace the Human Rights Act with a British Bill of Rights, and that threat's a very real threat. Promoting human rights internationally by working with other countries, and we heard about that in the wellbeing budgets debate earlier. Implementing UN guiding principles on business and human rights, and we heard about that in our world-leading national performance framework. Legislating to incorporate the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child into Scots law, being led by my colleague Marie Todd. Leading by example in human rights, including economic, social, cultural and environmental rights with our world-leading climate change proposals. And we set up the First Minister's Advisory Group on Human Rights Leadership to make recommendations on how Scotland can continue to lead by example in the field of human rights. Conference, we had our first meeting last week of the Scottish Government's Human Rights Task Force, co-chaired by our Cabinet Secretary, Shirley-Ann Somerville, and Professor Alan Miller, who you will know is a great champion in this area. Conference, we are not waiting in government for the disgraced Tory right-wing government to come after our ECHR or our Human Rights Act. We are working now to protect and advance those rights. I will never accept a repeal of our Human Rights Act. Conference, are you with me? Well, please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. To second this resolution, Alec Kerr, followed by Carol Boot. Welcome, Alec.
Hello. As you may have noticed, delegates, I'm not Angela Crawley. She sends her apologies and has asked me to stand in as she's been called down to London, along with our Westminster team, to take the fight for Scottish independence and our European membership directly to Boris Johnson and his band of Brexiteers. Conference. Across the world, human rights are under attack. So-called strongmen like Trump and Putin are running roughshod over the law and are trying to roll back our human rights. And as Christina McKelvey mentioned in her previous speech, the UK is no exception. As the most progressive party across these islands, this resolution is our opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to the gold standard of inalienable human rights. The European Convention of Human Rights is one of the best examples of what can come from working together with our neighbours, a forgotten art in the time where some are fixated with building walls. The Convention and the European Court of Human Rights are the final and ultimate protection for those who would otherwise have none. The last refuge for the poor, refugees, and those discriminated against. It is perhaps no surprise then, Conference, that the party of the rich and powerful, the Tories, have pushed for its removal on multiple occasions. The safest way to stop this happening, the opposition need to get their act together, because right now they are enabling, whether they intend to or not, this Tory government and everything they stand for. Boris Johnson and his cronies cannot be allowed to remain in government. Their most recent attempt planned to replace it with a British Bill of Rights. They openly admitted this would be a watered-down document aiming to strip rights from marginalised groups in the name of security. The thing about Human Rights Conference is that they are not worth a damn. Unless they are universal. They can keep their British Bill of Rights. Let's show the Tories that Scotland will always stand up for the vulnerable against those who would exploit them. Support this resolution, Conference, and send a message to the Tories. We will not let you take away our human rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Alec. And our final speaker on this resolution is Carol Boot. Welcome, Carol.
Conference, I wasn't expecting that. I had to scoot around in my mobility scooter, so that was fun. That's the fastest I've gone all day, I have to say. The European Charter for Human Rights actually sets out the fundamental human rights for all citizens of the continent of Europe and its islands, not just for citizens of the EU. And it's part of a system of regional human rights conventions across the world, which directly feeds into the UN Convention on Human Rights. It's not therefore a given that by exiting the EU, that via Article 50, that we automatically come out of the ECHR. In fact, the Article 50 doesn't make any mention of it. To withdraw from this would need to be a deliberate plan in addition to Brexit. Okay, and it's no surprise that a morally bankrupt Tory and uncaring Tory party is considering doing this under the blanket of fog that is Brexit to replace it with a Bill of Rights, which, as we know, will not benefit in any way, shape or form the most marginalised groups in our society who experience hate every day, who have unacceptable wage gaps and are considered a burden on society by the Tories. To do this will also have significant implications for our devolved government, as the Human Rights Act and the fundamental rights in the Charter are central to our settlements. And it would mean no access to justice for any fundamental right. It would affect the trade union movement and rights of Congress. It would affect the right to protest. So all those 200,000 people in Edinburgh last weekend, that would have been a problem there, would it? And the current protection of the 6 characteristics in the Equality Act, which also would be lost, will actually be, that's not going to happen. On an international level, the idea of disregarding the European Court of Human Justice and human rights will become a significant issue for our membership of the UN and the Security Council, because we have to be part of that, the UN Convention, and by default, the ECHR. Do we want to have our democracy and its principles so eroded that we be less tolerant of diversity in our society, exclude minority groups from any access to assert rights, and actually end up having less rights in China and other right-leaning countries? Conference, we must stand firm in our access to UN conventions, the ECHR, its justice, and by extension, the International Criminal Court. We must ensure just access to justice and human rights for all citizens, and for those are hard fought and hard won. We must fight to retain our fundamental rights as citizens of Europe in or out of the EU and stop this morally bankrupt UK government from denying us our fundamental rights. Conference, I support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. Conference, I'm sorry we can't take any more cards on this resolution. I know there were a number of people who had been keen to contribute. However, there were no cards in against the resolution. So, Conference, can I ask, is the resolution passed by acclaim? Thank you, Conference. That is the end of our public session for today, and we're going to move now to our internal session. So we'll have a brief pause before we do that, while anyone who's not a delegate has a chance to step outside of the room.